BMW's X7 classily meets the needs of wealthy buyers wanting a super luxury large SUV and needing to seat up to 7 adults. It's essentially a supersized X5, but it makes far more of a pavement statement, and inside feels very high-end indeed, especially in this updated form. If you don't much care what the neighbours think, or perhaps even if you do, then you'd probably quite like one.
Not every new BMW SUV these days is an EV, and not every one of them is aimed at Europe either. In late 2018, with an eye on the US, Middle East, Chinese and Asian markets, the Munich maker launched the X7, its largest SUV yet. 3 years on, one of the company's most comprehensive midlife updates ever made it that bit more sophisticated and created the car we're going to look at here. It needs to be better because life in this segment is these days quite a lot tougher for this car, with the introduction of all new Range Rover and Land Rover Defender models that can be had with 7 seats. This model's more familiar rival, the Mercedes GLS, has upped its game too, and Mercedes also now offers a 7-seat EV in this class, the EQS SUV. Hence all the effort put into this update. At this car's original launch, BMW told us the X7 was less a supersized X5 and more an alternative to a 7 Series saloon, a claim which now seems more credible, not only because of this updated model's newly acquired split headlamp front end, but also because of a jump in cabin sophistication that makes it feel a much more credible Range Rover rival. As before, this remains the most substantial piece of automotive real estate the Munich maker has ever brought us. But is it now easier to justify with its newly added mild hybrid engine tech? And can it now credibly be considered alongside the world's ultimate luxury SUV 7-seaters? Well, you'll need the industry's most comprehensive review, the car and driving road test, to find out. BMW was the first manufacturer to make a large luxury SUV that didn't fall about when presented with a corner at high speed. So, if anyone was going to be able to make a 5.1 metre Leviathan, weighing the best part of 2.5 tonnes, handle sensibly, you'd have to think this Munich maker would be in with a chance. It's not that an SUV this big can't, in theory, be agile. The issue's more that if you make it so, it would be very easy for an unskilled driver to get into trouble, enter a corner too quickly, or get a tank slapper on in something this tall and heavy, and you're not going to recover it easily. Which is why brands like Mercedes, Bentley and Rolls-Royce give their super large luxury SUVs a very conservative, dynamic setup, handling that doesn't encourage you to push on in corners with any kind of verve at all. If you ever do, vague steering feel, body roll and understeer discourage you from repeating the experiment. The X7 was originally developed that way too. No one was going to expect anything this large to be the ultimate driving machine, so it didn't matter, right? The end result, though, just didn't feel very BMW. The engineers were uncomfortable and sought permission from Munich to try something different. They would make the X7 as agile as it could be. Then they would layer on software for the steering, the differential, the suspension, and the all-wheel drive system to keep owners out of trouble. Instantly, the development prototype went 5 seconds quicker round the Nürburgring Nordschleife racetrack, yet also felt up to dealing with a much greater challenge of looking after a ham-fisted, inattentive driver. The team knew they'd found the sweet spot. As was necessary given the potential power of some of the engines on offer, all of which have been revitalised as part of the changes made to the updated model we're trying here. Each gains a new mild hybrid system, which works via a 48-volt motor inserted into this revised model's new 8-speed Steptronic Sport Auto gearbox. This motor on its own develops up to 12 horsepower, which you can use to gain an extra overtaking boost by pulling on the left-hand shift paddle for a second. This activates the sprint function we first saw on smaller BMW coupes, which delivers that useful extra burst of speed. You might think you'd regularly need that when overtaking or pushing on in an SUV this heavy, but actually the refettled engines feel pretty sprightly even when unaided by the 48-volt theatrics. Almost all sales will be of the two 3-litre straight-six models, both of which have gained more power as part of this facelift. The xDrive 40i petrol variant we're trying here has benefited most, with output up 40 horsepower to 380, which, aided by the transmission's built-in launch control system, facilitates a 0-62 mile/hour sprint time of 5.8 seconds en route to 155. The alternative xDrive 40D diesel, also uprated, offers 340 horsepower and 720 newton meters of pulling power, 180 more than the petrol version, delivering figures of 6.1 seconds and 151 miles an hour. Obviously, the black pump-fueled version is the one you'd choose for towing, though both variants offer the same 2.2-tonne braked towing weight. Those two models represent the starting point for prospective X7 buyers, but if budgetary limitations are less of an issue, you're going to want to consider the full-fat M-fettled version. There's now only one, the top petrol M60i, which uses a 4.4-litre twin-turbo V8 with 530 horsepower, and can somehow sprint nearly 2.5 tonnes of prime Bavarian automotive real estate past 62 miles an hour in just 4.7 seconds, which makes it only around a second slower than a Ferrari Portofino. With this kind of pace on offer, it's appropriate that BMW equips the M60i with a standard M Sport differential, an electronically controlled rear differential lock, powered by an electric motor and governed by the car's DSC, or driving stability control system. When cornering at speed, this setup allows as much as 1,500 newton meters of drive torque to be redirected from a faster turning wheel to a slower turning one, helping to fire you from bend to bend. We'll also point out that the M60i's got very good brakes, and it also makes a pretty good noise, though you can replicate that to some extent by specifying the optional sports exhaust with the 6-cylinder versions. Even without that, all versions of this BMW have quite a nice snarl, thanks to a clever bit of software that enhances the engine note through the stereo speakers. The normal Eco Pro, Comfort and Sport settings, as usual, tweak steering, throttle response, gear change timings and stability control thresholds to suit the way you want to drive. And they influence ride quality too, thanks to a variable damping control setup that allows those modes to alter the settings of the standard 2-axle air suspension. The Sport mode has an individual submenu that allows you to tweak damping, steering and drivetrain response to personal preference. Eco Pro has an individual submenu too, but there your personalisation options are damping, steering and climate functions. If you leave the software to make its own decisions, you'll probably get more benefit from the predictive technology that BMW's built into this drivetrain. Here, sat-nav data is used to prime the car for upcoming hazards like sharp bends or junctions. It all works so smoothly that you're never really aware that so much is going on behind the scenes to make your journey smoother and more efficient. But that's the kind of system that would complete the luxury demeanour of a rival Mercedes GLS or an even more expensive Bentley Bentayga in the super luxury SUV segment. As we suggested earlier though, the X7 aims to be more than just a large luxury saloon on steroids, as you'll discover when you click into the sport driving mode. This tightens up body control, adds extra weight to the steering and drops the car 20mm closer to the tarmac at speeds of over 86 miles an hour. As all this is happening, a display on the instrument screen can even show you G-force readings. To some extent, this car can shrink around you at speed once its dimensions become familiar, and once it does, you might easily convince yourself that you were in a significantly smaller luxury SUV. An easier thing to do with this revised model thanks to the slightly greater feedback you get from the retuned electric power steering system. The speed with which the improved xDrive four-wheel drive system subtly shuffles power around through the bends really helps the handling, of course. The current version of this setup is able to split drive torque between the front and rear wheels with great precision and, of course, offers rear-based drive distribution appropriate to this BMW's dynamic demeanour. As usual, the system's based around a Haldex-style multi-plate clutch that can push up to 80% of drive to either the front or the rear wheels to suit whatever tractional needs you happen to have. X7 buyers who like the idea of power going to both ends of this car might also like the idea of steering taking place at both front and rear axles too. That's what you get with the integral active steering system, optional on the 40D and 40i variants and standard on the M60i. This uses a variable steering rack ratio that works as you turn the wheel, moving the rear wheels in either of two ways depending on how fast you're going. At parking speeds, the rear wheels will turn in the opposing direction to those at the front for greater manoeuvrability. If you're going much more quickly at speed, the rear wheels will turn in the same direction as those at the front, giving you greater stability and agility. If your X7 has integral active steering fitted, you'll also be offered the option of paying extra for what BMW calls its Executive Drive Pro Pack, which delivers the brand's anti-roll stabilisation technology. This setup uses automatically adjustable anti-roll bars that give you lots of suspension movement for a great ride in a straight line, yet spring into action through the bends to compensate for the body roll you'd otherwise get. When you match all this up to the benefits of that adaptive drive mode setting we were talking about earlier, with predictive navigation data that anticipates and allows for the next bump or turn, you have all the ingredients for a beautiful ride and handling balance. There's even a degree of semi-autonomous driving capability if you then further add in all the many and varied electronic camera-driven features that come with the optional Driving Assistant Professional pack. Even if you choose not to equip your X7 with all of this kind of kit, you'll find this BMW an exceptionally accomplished highway touring device. You really need to be on the highway to experience this car at its best. At lower speeds, the air suspension struggles more than you'd expect, with things like potholes and speed humps, and the diesel engine isn't especially quiet when it's idling or ambling along. Once up to speed though, refinement is exemplary. In fact, on ordinary tarmac, we've not tried a quieter SUV in this class. It's worth mentioning though that on broken asphalt, the big, wide tyres generate a significant amount of roar. We'll finish, as we usually do with an SUV, with a few words on the provision, or more usually lack of provision, of off-piste prowess. The xDrive 4x4 system on offer here might not be set up for mud plugging, but it's still more capable than most owners will ever need it to be, using its electronically actuated multi-plate clutch and the cleverness of BMW's dynamic stability control system to alter drive from the normal 40-60 front to rear bias to 100% front or rear as necessary. As you'd want, hill descent control is standard to ease you down slippery slopes, and the inclusion of standard air suspension means that you can select the exact level of ground clearance you need for the terrain you're tackling. If you use this center console switch, you can raise the body in 2 stages up to a maximum of 40mm above its standard setting, and at its loftiest point you'll be sitting 221mm off the deck. When you are off tarmac, the standard Parking Assistant Pro surround view camera system is a boon, allowing you to see images of each individual wheel on the infotainment screen as if you were viewing them from the outside. So if you're about to drive over a rock, a tree root or a precipice, you can see it. Plus there's an X-View screen in the My BMW section of the centre dash infotainment display that shows you your air suspension setting, compass bearings, your altitude and driving angles. For that rare breed of X7 buyer likely to be regularly using this car on rough trails, the Munich maker offers an optional X off-road pack, available on 40D and 40i variants, not fitted with the anti-roll stabilisation Executive Drive Pro package. The X off-road pack gives you a sump guard, a mechanical differential lock, specific driving screen interfaces, and a series of transmission and suspension settings for various different surfaces. The additional modes badged X Sand, X Rocks, X Gravel and X Snow. Of course, it could be argued that in speccing up an X7 for ultimate mud plugging prowess, you're somehow missing the point of this car. Or you could take the point of view that a version of this BMW specified in X off-road form would be close to being the ultimate tarmac or trail conveyance. Both perspectives are valid. Some would also argue that the level of tarmac handling sharpness that BMW has managed to achieve in a car so big and heavy is equally irrelevant in a luxury SUV, but you can't help admiring it. BMW calls this advanced intelligence. We call it pretty darn impressive. This is a more sophisticated kind of X7, and the visual changes made to this updated model aim to reflect that. It was already a pretty enormous piece of pavement real estate because that's what the segment wants. US, Asian and Middle Eastern buyers need their luxury SUVs to be big and very imposing. If you want an X7 here, that's what you're going to like about it. Is this huge, oversized front grille a step too far? Well, not if you take the view that there's simply no point in a car that's 5.15 metres long, 2 metres wide and over 1.8 metres high being aesthetically shy and retiring. This one certainly isn't. The other reason this grille is here is because BMW's other super luxury product, the 7 Series Saloon, has it. Previously, that was the only visual link between these two cars, but as part of this update, the X7 gains the 7 model's split LED matrix headlamp units too. Also, like that flagship sedan, the grille has been embellished with the company's iconic glow cascade lighting, which activates at night or when one of the doors is opened. The Munich maker hopes all of this will put paid to the previous perception of this car as merely a supersized X5. That was understandable not only because the two models roll out of the same US Spartanburg factory, but also because the basic engineering of this model has far more in common with an X5 than a 7 Series. Not much has changed in that regard. The 7's carbon core construction, which sees extensive use of carbon fibre alongside aluminium and steel when it comes to structural elements, is still too costly to productionise for a higher volume SUV. We mean higher volume in global terms, of course. No more than around 800 X7s will hit our roads each year, which will make it a suitably exclusive sight. Most will be sold with the M Sport trim we have here, which gains you a bespoke front apron with a large lower air intake and high gloss black trim on the outer edges of the air curtains. All of this, plus the substantial lower intake and the gigantic grille, is presumably intended to frighten fast-lane dawdlers into submission, and probably will. You'll certainly not be short of overtaking presence in one of these. From the side, you get more of a feel for the sheer size of this car. It's 229mm longer than an X5. You'd expect that, but you might be surprised to find an X7 will also extend out of a parking space a full 99mm further than a standard length Range Rover. Emphasising the length is this upwardly angled mid-level crease that flows from the front wheel arch, then along below the door handles and into the substantial rear haunches. Further down, the big wheel arches are separated by a lower trim strip that takes its starting point from the usual BMW vertical air breather situated behind the front wheel. And, of course, to suit the current zeitgeist, the arches house simply huge rims that are usually 21 inches in size, though we've actually got even bigger 22-inch M double-spoke bi-colour alloys here, through the spokes of which you glimpse the blue calipers of the upgraded M Sport braking system. Even bigger 23-inch wheels are now available on request, the largest BMW has ever fitted to any production car. Subtle roof rails come in satin aluminium or, as in this case, in high gloss black. The rear end makes rather less of a statement, broken up by horizontal lines and bordered by vertical separating edges. BMW's resisted the temptation to follow the current trend for full-width lighting panels, so instead a chrome bar spans the tailgate, flowing into these revised three-dimensional L-shaped light units. The lamps now get more intense LED illumination, and the obligatory skid plate is built into the lower part of this widely styled bumper. As usual, what's more important is the stuff you can't see. This car, like most of BMW's current larger models, based on the Munich maker's CLAR or cluster architecture platform, built upon, in this case, with a bonnet, front side panels and doors, all fashioned from aluminium. Time to take a look inside. Now, as standard, BMW includes its Digital Key Plus package, which allows you to use near-field communication and security-enhanced ultra-wideband radio technology to unlock your X7 using your smartphone, though only if it happens to be of the Apple variety. As is appropriate in such a large SUV, you climb up into the driver's seat of an X7 and find yourself positioned commandingly in front of a rather different dashboard in this updated model. Gone is the previous instrument binnacle, the centre stack ventilation controls have vanished, and you don't even now get a gear stick. It's all a lot more change than you'd expect from a mere facelift, but BMW is a company of change right now and is on the move up market, as is evidenced by the higher quality materials and this interior's more contemporary feel. Added extra touches now include this smart X7 branded ambient light bar ahead of the front seat passenger, the 15-colour ambient lighting system and the Sensafin faux leather quilted dashboard covering. True, the finished effect of all this still isn't quite as classy as a Range Rover or as memorable as the handcrafted finishing you'd get in a Bentley Bentayga, but for well-specified versions of either of those cars, you could easily find yourself paying half as much again. BMW hopes that the kind of exotic feel some better-heeled buyers might be seeking can be met, at least in part, by a few of this car's more exclusive options. The cabin's certainly lifted by fittings like this gorgeous anthracite Alcantara headliner and the crystal-like crafted clarity glass finish that's available to trim the gear selection switch, the iDrive controller and the start-stop button. A further air of elegant sophistications delivered by the intricate mesh backlit speaker grills of the optional 20-channel 1,475-watt Bowers & Wilkins 3D Diamond surround sound system, and more significantly by the twin screens of this updated model's new super slim curved display. That combines this 12.3-inch digital instrument cluster display with a centre dash infotainment monitor of 14.9 inches, all of it accessible via touchscreen, the usual lower iDrive touch controller, steering wheel buttons, your voice and even gesture control, which, as on other BMW models, is frustrating to try and master. Still, the Munich maker has matched and in some cases exceeded the current media connectivity class standard here, thanks to the adoption of the company's latest generation operating system 8 software with its improved intelligent personal assistant voice control setup. You can use the latter feature to operate the climate system, the previous controls for which have been reduced down to this pair of silver toggles for airflow direction, and a heating or cooling screen menu that you access via an ever-present icon at the bottom of the centre monitor, with temperature controls either side. Beyond this, you're faced with what initially seems quite a baffling array of ventilation display options, though actually with familiarity it all works quite well. Which is also true when it comes to using this central display for other things. Your starting point will probably be the layout we've got here, a system of large widget tiles which you swipe to the left or right, with right-hand shortcut options for media, phone and nav. There's a menu option too, this connecting you into the far less satisfactory alternative starting display, which gives you a confusing layout full of tiny icons, unseparated in importance, so rarely used apps command the same screen space as a driving settings section you'll need to activate every day. However you access all the media functions, there's an awful lot to get to grips with. Some of the functions are properly cutting edge, the 5G Wi-Fi hotspot, for instance, ideal for TikTok-obsessed grandchildren. And some are slightly questionable, like the optional interior camera, which gives you in-car CCTV. BMW calls it a security monitor, but divorce lawyers across the globe will gleefully seize upon its possibilities. Quite a few features require access via a BMW ID, which you'll have if you're using the My BMW app, but which you can also add to another smartphone. So personal interior settings and activated features can be instantly communicated to the car whenever you're driving it. And you can add to that menu of features in the course of your ownership life, thanks to over-the-air updates and extra tech that can be purchased via the BMW Connected Drive store. Not that too much extra will be needed. A head-up display is standard, so is a Harman Kardon surround sound audio system, though you'll be tempted by the Bowers & Wilkins Diamond surround upgrade we mentioned earlier. That's been fitted here. The 12.3-inch instrument cluster display screen innovates too. In the past, we've criticised BMW instrument screens for confusing design and a lack of customisation options, the absence of full screen mapping, for instance. This display is much better. There are 3 selectable layout options, accessible via this button on the right-hand wheel spoke. These different layouts gradually increase the size of the customisable features that display in the middle of the screen, accessible via a selectable content menu. Choose from a drive assist info, a digital speedo, a G-forces display, a compass and your audio preferences. Sat-nav mapping can display too, and though even with the broadest layout option selected, it isn't quite full screen, it'll be detailed enough when complemented by the right head-up display setting, there are 5, and with full use of BMW's latest augmented reality nav system tech, which brings key journeying features directly into your view. Enough with connectivity, what else do you need to know here? Well, perhaps that the brand's standard heated comfort spec seats are superbly supportive, incorporating lumbar adjustment that can be moved up and down as well as in and out. In addition, a range of little touches make a lot of difference. Take these heated and cooled cup holders, which we number amongst the industry's greatest modern inventions. You'll think so anyway, when you use them with your beverage on a freezing cold morning or a blistering hot day. Plus, we like the automatic window feature you can set in the personal assistant menu to automatically retract the driver's window at preset times and places. The security barrier on your way into the office, for instance. And all-round visibility, well, the fact that you can see the tops of the front wings from the driver's seat gives you a feeling of manoeuvrability and control that some compensation for the way that your over-the-shoulder vision is spoiled by all the rear head restraints and the chunky rear pillars between the rearmost side windows and the tailgate. Not that parking this car should be too much of a problem. As well as all-round sensors, all X7s get BMW's surround view camera system as part of the Parking Assistant Pro package, which can park the car for you in spaces either parallel or perpendicular to the road. As before, there's also a standard reversing assistant that activates with green or red strips on the steering wheel spokes and automatically reverses you along whatever path you'd previously taken forward. The functionality of this has been further built on by an additional manoeuvre assistant, which uses GPS data and the trajectory data from steering movements to store up to 10 different manoeuvres, covering a distance of up to 200 metres each. So, next time you arrive at that awkward space in the office car park, you'll need only to push a button and let the car do the rest. What else? Well, cabin storage is pretty well catered for. This stowage area at the bottom of the centre stack is accessed by this beautifully damped lid that slides back to reveal a wireless charging mat along with a USB-C port, a 12-volt socket and the twin cup holders we mentioned. There's also this twin lidded box between the seats which incorporates another USB-C port, a storage cubby by the driver's right knee, ticket clips on the sun visors, and huge large door pockets. Only an overhead sunglasses compartment is missing. Oh, and a decently sized glove box. This one's not as big as it looks. We'll also mention that rather uniquely, it's possible to alter the fore and aft positioning of the second row seats via this control on the driver's door, and even tip them forward to allow access to the third row, all without you needing to move from behind the wheel. Talking of those in the back, it's time to take a look at the two rearmost seating rows. Now, there's no doubt about it, when it comes to rear passenger space, size does matter. Or at least it does if your brief is to seat 7 adults comfortably in an SUV. You might think that something like, say, a Bentley Bentayga is pretty large, but you'll still find that car to be quite cramped if you happen to be in one in which the optional third seating row has been specified and you've been confined to the very back. An X7 has 110mm more wheelbase length than that Bentley. True, a competing Mercedes GLS gives you fractionally more, and a Rolls-Royce Cullinan a little more again. But as for any other big SUV you can think of, forget it. An X7 is certainly in a different league from the Audi Q7, Volvo XC90 and Land Rover Discovery 7-seat models that most of the motoring press tends to talk inaccurately about alongside it, as we'll find out here. In terms of ease of access, it certainly helps that these back doors are longer than those at the front. Once you take a seat in the second row, you'll quickly appreciate the generous legroom on offer made possible by this car's lengthy 3,105mm wheelbase. We've got the X7 in its standard 7-seat configuration here, which gives you this 3-person bench. Your alternative is to specify the optional 6-seater package, which instead fits out the second row with 2 individual comfort spec seats similar to those at the front, each with their own armrests and cushioned headrests. That'll give second row folk more luxury and more room to spread out. Plus, it'll make it easier to get to the rearmost seating row. But of course, it'll mean compromises in terms of seat folding flexibility and, obviously, passenger capacity. On balance, we'd prefer to stick with this bench. After all, it's not as if you're lacking luxury here. You get these exquisitely cushioned headrests, plus electric seat controls for the 2 outer positions, adjust the backrests and move the powered seat bases through a range of 145mm. More importantly, being able to take 3 folk in this middle part of the car might occasionally be useful to be able to do, something which is comfortably possible in an X7, not only because of its 2-metre width, but also because the Sentra transmission tunnel is so notably low. If the central part of the bench had an ISOFIX attachment, which unfortunately it doesn't, it would even be possible to mount 3 child seats alongside each other. If there are only 2 occupants back here, you'll be able to use this armrest, which incorporates a storage compartment and pop-out cup holders. Seat back pockets are provided, and there are decently sized door pockets with bottle holders. Plus, you'll find a storage cubby and twin USB ports provided below the central twin vents for the standard 4-zone climate control system. There are B-pillar vents too, and you're probably going to want to consider a few options for this part of your X7. We've got 2 key ones fitted here, principally this huge panoramic sky lounge glass roof. This includes 15,000 graphic patterns that generate an adaptable ceiling display reminiscent of a starlit sky. A more conventional glass roof comes as standard, and neither roof setup unduly compromises headroom. Another option fitted to this car is the travel and comfort system, which adds in an extra USB port to each seat back, plus a little compartment with a sliding cover which conceals a multi-function bracket to which folk at the back can attach things like tablets. If you really want to spoil yourself, you can also specify a rear seat entertainment package, which incorporates a couple of 10.2-inch touchscreens. Right, enough with that. Let's take a look at the third row, supposed to be adult-friendly. Is that claim justified here? Well, let's see. Most of the time, squirming your way into the third seating row in a car of this kind requires a level of limbed flexibility that probably would defeat Grandma on your weekly Sunday afternoon outing to the garden centre. But she should be fine here as long as she can manage the step up into the cabin. Now, pushing the middle row seat out of the way isn't as quick as it would be if the operation was manually operated, but if you're not in a hurry, it's nice not to have to struggle with the usual awkwardly sprung mechanism. A press of this arrow button on the seat shoulder sees the chair move forward and eventually angle itself up in a fashion that leaves a reasonably generous entry aperture. Once installed back here, there's pretty much the same sort of space as you'd find in a large MPV. That's quite a statement to make when describing the third row in anything SUV-like. Cars like these almost always have high floor heights so as to leave space for the four-wheel drive mechanicals below, which means that in the very back of a typical 7-seat SUV, you usually have to sit with your knees up towards your ears. That's not the case here. True, there's not quite as much legroom as there would be in a rival Mercedes GLS model. That's because the Merc has a 30mm longer wheelbase, but it's vastly better than the cramped third-row conditions an adult would experience in, say, a Volvo XC90, an Audi Q7 or a Land Rover Discovery. If you've a large family with grown-up teenagers, that could be a crucial consideration. If you happen to be using this third row for child seats, you'll be pleased to find that this is one of the few 7-seat SUVs on the market that incorporates ISOFIX fastenings to its third row chairs. There's a cup holder on both sides of the cabin. You get 2 USB-C ports, and as an option you can also specify a 5-zone climate control system with a specifically orientated third row zone with temperature and fan speeds activated by this roof panel. Ceiling vents are provided on both sides, and the rearmost side windows offer a decent view out. In short, what's on offer here is a first-class SUV that doesn't demote third-row passengers to third-class travel. OK, let's finish with a look at the boot. Now, if we're going to be absolutely accurate, this isn't actually the first time the BMW Group has developed a super large luxury SUV. Back at the turn of the century, the Bavarians actually paid for and part developed the L322 series third-generation Range Rover when they owned Land Rover a couple of decades ago. And a carryover from that car that the Munich maker decided it rather liked is this two-piece tailgate. Here, of course, it's electrically powered and you can operate it with a wave of your foot beneath the bumper if, key in pocket, you find yourself approaching the car laden down with bags. You'll like the way that you can sit on this panel if, for instance, you want to put your Wellington boots on, or if you merely like the whole tailgate picnic vibe. And on its outer edge, you'll find a button that will lower the air suspension height by 40mm and make it easier to get heavier items inside. You won't be expecting much space inside the boot when all 3 seating rows are in use, but actually it's not bad at all. 326 litres, about the same as you get in the trunk of a Ford Focus, and enough for a couple of medium-sized suitcases. There's this neat branded mid-height shelf, a netted storage area on the right, a 12-volt socket also on the right, and twin silver tie-down points. There's also more room below the boot floor, though only because BMW declines to offer any sort of spare wheel, even as an option, a decision we fundamentally disapprove of in such a capable SUV. You can at least store the tonneau cover here when not in use. Most of the time, though, you're going to want to fold these third-row pews into the floor, which requires use of this left-hand bank of electric switches and will double the amount of cargo space on offer. If you happen to be at the side of the car, there's another switch panel that'll either retract or erect the third-row chairs in the same way. Obviously, once you've done this, you can vary the amount of space on offer as needed by powering the middle row bench either forward or back. If you need more room, but it's only for long and thin items like skis, you'll be able to flatten the centre part of this 40-20-40 split rear bench. If that's not enough, then the whole second row bench can be folded flat via more electric buttons. Once everything's flat, up to 2,120 litres of space is freed up. The fact that this figure is 280 litres less than would be offered by a similarly configured Mercedes GLS is unlikely to unduly bother a typical X7 buyer. Bear in mind that if you happen to have deleted this second row bench and gone for the two separate chairs of the six-seater cabin layout we were talking about earlier, your cargo capacity will be hugely reduced because the two middle row chairs won't fold flat. At the time of this test in autumn 2022, X7 models were priced from just over £83,000, quite an increase from the £70,000 starting point that applied as recently as 2019, when we first tested the original version of this car. The standard trim level is excellence, but most customers opt to pay the extra £3,000 BMW wants for the M Sport spec we have here. In the mainstream range, you'll be choosing between two 48-volt mild hybrid 3-litre six-cylinder engines, either the 340 HP unit in the xDrive 40D diesel or, for £620 more, the 380 horsepower power plant found in the xDrive 40i petrol variant we're trying here. Your other option is much pricier, the top petrol M60i xDrive model, a 530 horsepower V8 super SUV priced at up around £108,000. We'll also mention that there's just this single body style, which sounds an obvious thing to say, but BMW actually showed a pickup design study version of the X7. Yes, really, though apparently there are as yet no plans to produce it. Let's give you some BMW range perspective on X7 pricing. You're looking at a premium of around £17,000 over a comparably engined and trimmed X5, though the brand would correctly point out that if you equipped an X5 to X7 standards, the price difference between the two cars would be considerably less. Bear in mind, by the way, that an X5 can no longer be ordered with an optional third seating row, which back at the time of this X7's original launch was a shortcut to 7-seat BMW SUV ownership. The Bavarian maker hopes that its largest SUV might be considered as an alternative to its 7 Series luxury saloon. We're not so sure about that, and price comparisons between the two models are difficult to make, or at least they were at the time of making this film, when the only combustion 7 Series power plant available was the kind of plug-in hybrid system you can't have here. For reference, a 7 Series PHEV was at the time of this test priced right up at over £117,000. Even if BMW brings in more conventionally engined 7 Series variants, it seems likely that this X7 will continue to deliver a lot more car for the money. What about the X7 value proposition compared to rivals from other brands? Well, we'll start with BMW's closest rival, the Mercedes GLS, which in mainstream GLS 400D diesel form is priced in much the same £85,000 to £95,000 bracket. The GLS is also available in Mercedes AMG 63 petrol guise too, if you want an alternative to the X7 M60i. The GLS 63 4MATIC Plus costs way more though, priced up at £136,000 at the time of filming, though its 612 horsepower output is 82 higher than that of the M60i. In all its forms though, you'll find an X7 to be a significantly more agile thing than a GLS. What about other rivals? Well, Land Rover now offers two 7-seat models in this segment. If you're happy with something capable but slightly less plush, there's the stretched Defender 130, which has a 300 horsepower diesel engine and, at the time of this test, a starting price of around £76,000. Or if you want more of an SUV IP, a comparable long wheelbase 7-seat Range Rover D350 costs from around £107,000 at the time of film. Are there other luxury SUVs that could closely rival what's on offer here? Well, not really. You could talk about various BMW X5 sized luxury SUVs with 7 seats, say a Volvo XC90, an Audi Q7 or a Land Rover Discovery, but they're all really a size below this X7. And these models can't really fit adults in their third row seats with any real degree of long-distance comfort, which is, of course, why they cost £10,000 to £15,000 less. Still, if you were only going to use this car's third row chairs for children anyway, a plushly specified XC90, Q7 or appropriately specified Discovery might appeal as an alternative here. And what about if money's no object and you're minded to consider an X7 as a candidate for space in one of those oak-framed garages at your country manor house? Maybe as something for the au pair to use for the school run, perhaps. Well, you might already be aware that you can't have a 7-seat format in a Rolls-Royce Cullinan, which means that if the Mercedes GLS or the Range Rover long wheelbase don't appeal, your only other luxury SUV option would be to buy a Bentley Bentayga, the entry-level version of which costs around £80,000 more than a base X7, and pay extra for that car's optional third seating row. But an optional third row is always a cramped third row. In any case, it's the X7 that's actually the bigger of the two cars. And size matters when you're a multi-millionaire, or so we're told anyway. If, having considered all of this, you've concluded that it is an X7 that you really want, then you're going to need to know just how generous BMW's been with the standard spec. So let's take a look at that now. As well as xDrive four-wheel drive, all models get the latest version of BMW's 8-speed Steptronic auto transmission, which means that launch control and a sprint function for extra overtaking boost both come as standard. And an adaptive 2-axle air suspension setup with 80mm of 5-level height adjustment. A setup that can also drop the rear of the car to facilitate easy loading. In addition, of course, as with every BMW, there's drive performance control, so you can fine-tune throttle, steering and gear change response via Eco Pro, Comfort, Sport and Adaptive modes. Standard dynamic damper control means those settings will also tweak ride quality as well. Beyond all that, the X7 kit list is appropriately extensive, with even base trim delivering quite a lot. To be specific, you get big 21-inch alloy wheels, adaptive LED headlights, front fog lights, LED tail lamps, roof rails, a rear-view parking camera, all-round parking sensors, acoustic glazing, a 2-section powered tailgate, auto headlamps and wipers, run-flat tyres, an alarm, aluminium running boards, and soft closed doors that shut themselves if you don't slam them properly. Refreshingly, metallic paint's standard too. Here we've got mineral white. Inside, 7 seats are fitted as standard with powered erection and retraction for the second and third row, though there's alternatively an optional 6-seat layout. We'll get to that in a moment. Whatever the seating layout chosen, you'll get BMW individual extended merino soft leather upholstery in either black, ivory white or a brown shade called tartufo. Man-made leatherette upholstery is a no-cost option, and the front seats will be of BMW's particularly supportive comfort design. Plus, of course, they'll feature heating and electric adjustability with memory settings. All X7s also feature a panoramic glass sunroof, cruise control and automatic 4-zone air conditioning with separate controls for middle row passengers. You additionally get a sport leather steering wheel, heated second row seats, an auto-dimming rear view mirror, a wireless phone charging mat and an instrument panel wrapped in Sensafin stitched vegan man-made leather. The standard interior inlay package sees fine wood black wood matched with metal effect trim. Cabin lighting's of theatrical importance too in a car like this. You get a classy ambient lighting system with 15 colour tones and a variety of settings. Plus, you get a wireless phone charger, soft closed doors and velour floor mats. For after hours, there's the brand's distinctive iconic glow illuminated front kidney grille and a welcome light carpet puddle light setup that illuminates across the ground to guide you into the cabin when you unlock the doors at night. Also standard is BMW's Comfort Access package that provides not only keyless entry, but also remote-powered closing of the two-piece tailgate that can be activated with a wave of your foot beneath the bumper. Comfort Access additionally allows you to open this BMW with an Apple iPhone, the unlocking function working with an NFC chip, which the brand says is harder to hack than the standard key. Plus, you can send locking and startup access for your X7 to up to 4 friends. And because their BMW profile can be stored as part of the brand's so-called open mobility cloud, your X7 will automatically set itself to those people's preferred driving settings when they use your car. With a car this big, parking might be a worry, but it shouldn't be. All X7s come with the brand's remarkably complete Parking Assistant Pro package, which can also park your X7 for you into a parallel or perpendicular space and do a lot more besides. The package includes a 360-degree surround view camera system, which via a remote 3D view function you can also summon up on your smartphone. Plus, there's a trailer assistant feature too, which makes it easier to execute parking manoeuvres when towing a trailer. In addition, the Parking Assistant Pro package includes 2 really neat parking features you won't find on rival models. If you've tried other recent BMWs, you might already be familiar with the clever reversing assistant, which remembers the steering movements made during the vehicle's last forward manoeuvre and replicates them when moving backwards. So, for example, it takes over when you're reversing out of a parking position you drove into the previous night, or controls the car if you have to reverse backwards for up to 50 yards. It's really clever. What you probably won't have tried, though, prior to sampling this improved X7 is the manoeuvre assistant, which remembers awkward parking manoeuvres and can save them in its memory, then conduct them for you the next time you visit that parking location. When you are manoeuvring or parking at low speeds, an active PDC emergency braking feature can stop you from hitting objects you might not have seen, like rocks or a low wall, or more seriously, a child or a pet. On to media stuff. Now, for the kind of money being asked here, you'd expect a very high level of technology and connectivity. And of course you get it, courtesy of BMW's Live Cockpit Professional package, which runs on the company's latest Operating System 8 software and gives you a 12.3-inch instrument cluster screen and a 14.9-inch central display. This incorporates a very advanced BMW navigation setup, giving you route guidance with augmented reality, which brings key journeying features more directly into your line of sight. Also included is a 16-speaker 464-watt Harman Kardon surround sound audio system. There's obviously a lot more than just a sound system and navigation with the Live Cockpit Professional package. As you'd expect, it also includes Apple CarPlay and Android Auto wireless smartphone integration, which allows you to access digital services like Google Assistant, Google Maps, music streaming services like Spotify and Amazon Music, along with the WhatsApp messaging service. Plus, there's the ability to implement a super-fast 5G Wi-Fi hotspot and to use gesture control for various cabin features, though we found that feature difficult to master. Voice control comes courtesy of an improved version of the BMW Intelligent Personal Assistant system, which learns your preferences and is familiar with your favoured settings, say for the seat heating or the places you frequently drive to using the navigation system. It also responds directly to the prompt, "Hey BMW." In this improved model, it can do extra things like adjust the climate system, open a window, or adjust the panoramic glass roof. As brand loyalists would expect, this X7 also includes plenty of the brand's really clever digital connectivity features too. including the full suite of BMW Connected Package Pro services, things like real-time traffic information, which warns you of congestion along your chosen route, and Connected Parking, which offers multi-storey and on-street parking information in selected cities in the UK and Europe. There's also BMW's concierge services, which at the press of a button will give you direct access to an operator who will be able to answer almost any question about your journey as you drive. And the Connected Package Pro option also includes connected music, which offers unlimited streaming of millions of songs in the vehicle from Spotify. Plus, there's the company's suite of BMW vehicle apps that gives you access to things like news reports, weather forecasts for up to 4 days ahead, and information on highway tolls. In addition, the system can remotely update itself with fresh features and mapping upgrades. And of course, it will read out text messages to you. We'll also mention BMW teleservices, which can decide when a garage visit is required and automatically book it. And as a customer of this Munich maker, you get a 3-month trial of a connected teaser package that gives you BMW music, which allows you to export your favourite soundtracks into your car. If you've owned a BMW before, you might be familiar with the standard remote services package that allows you to control many aspects of your vehicle's operation via your smartphone. And you'll maybe also recognise the downloadable My BMW app, which can learn your mobility routines, read your calendar, and even prompt you when to leave for scheduled journeys. It'll get familiar with your most frequently travelled routes and memorise them as future destinations. Plus, the app will help you to find your car if you've forgotten where you've parked it, and can remotely lock or unlock the doors. What else? Well, if your priorities in X7 ownership lie in regularly driving off a paved surface, then you'll want to consider an investment of £2,600 in the brand's X Off-Road Pack. This includes underguard protection elements, a mechanical differential lock, and 4 extra off-road driving modes: X Sand, X Rocks, X Gravel and X Snow. Plus, you get special off-road interfaces for the 2 fascia screens, and BMW also includes its M Sport differential in the X Off-Road Pack because it increases traction on loose surfaces. The X Off-Road Pack can't be had with an M60i. Right, on to luxury stuff. Come on, you've earned the chance to spoil yourself a bit here. Our favourite individual extra is the Sky Lounge Pack, which gives you a Sky Lounge 2-part panoramic glass roof, which includes 15,000 graphic patterns that generate an adaptable ceiling display reminiscent of a starlit sky. Brilliant. You can also individually specify sun protection glass, a dashboard trimmed in black Walknapper real leather, BMW's Trackstar vehicle tracker system, and an electrically folding tow bar. 2 different styles of 22-inch wheel rim are available, and if you really must go large, then there's a 23-inch rim available, the largest size BMW's ever offered. There's an exclusive BMW individual Amatrin metallic paint shade available too, and just about everything else you could want to spend extra on in this car must be had as part of one of BMW's optional packs. So, we'll brief you on those now. Most X7 customers go for items in the £3,750 Comfort Plus pack, which gives you 8 extra features. Ambient air supplies the interior of the vehicle with air ionisation and scents. 5-zone automatic air conditioning adds an extra climate zone at the very back for third-row passengers. A heat comfort system warms not only the steering wheel, but the door armrests and the centre console. And there are also heated second-row seats, rear side window blinds, heated and cooled cup holders, and ventilated cooled front seats with a massage function. The next pack you might want to look at is the £5,000 Technology Plus pack, which gives you the upgraded Bowers & Wilkins Diamond surround sound system and BMW's Driving Assistant Professional driver assistance system. We'll brief you further on that shortly. If it's a sportier vibe you're after, and you've chosen an M Sport model like this one, you'll be offered the chance to spend £2,750 more on an M Sport Pro pack, which gives you an M Sport exhaust system, larger 22-inch jet black V-spoke wheels with run-flat tyres, M Sport brakes with black calipers, sun protection glass, M Sport seat belts and black high-gloss shadow line front grille finishing. What about if you like the thought of all the extras so far mentioned and your budget isn't particularly limited? Well, in that case, provided you're looking at an M Sport model like this one, it'll be easier just to tick the box for the full-fat Ultimate pack we've got fitted to this test car, which gives you all the extra features we've just briefed you on. Yes, all of them, including the integral active steering and electromechanical anti-roll stabilisation systems. This pack's plump £16,000 price also includes M carbon side mirror caps, a crafted clarity glass finish for the gear selection switch, the iDrive controller and the start-stop button, and a travel and comfort system also available separately, which adds in an extra USB port to each front seat back, plus a little compartment with a sliding cover which conceals a multi-function bracket to which folk at the back can attach things like tablets. OK, enough with standard kit and options. Let's go on to consider safety provision. Now, as you'd expect, a full range of camera-driven safety features are included. BMW groups the main ones in its Active Guard Plus intelligent safety package, the key element of which, as you might expect, is autonomous braking, or as the Munich maker calls it, front collision warning with city braking. This system works as these kinds of setups normally do. At over 30 miles an hour, the vehicle scans the road ahead for potential accident hazards, and if one's detected, you'll be warned and the brakes pre-conditioned for maximum effectiveness. Should you be travelling at under 30 miles an hour and be not responding to a detected hazard, the brakes will automatically be applied, reducing the severity of any resulting collision and hopefully alleviating it altogether. There are two other standard Active Guard Plus features: lane departure warning with steering impulse, alerts you if you cross lane delineating lines, and speed limit information, pictures road signs you pass and displays them on the dash. There's also a drive-off monitoring feature where speed's limited when driving off if an obstacle's detected in the way. Passive safety's well covered too. BMW's current large SUVs have had to meet more stringent safety testing than any of their predecessors, hence this X7's particularly stiff, wide body shell. This can pass stringent Euro NCAP challenges like the side pole test, which requires the passenger cell not to deform if the car is crashed sideways into a rigid pole at 20 miles an hour, simulating a real-world impact against a pole or a tree. In such a situation, this X7's curtain airbags could be a lifesaver. And of course, there are the usual twin front and side bags too, plus a driver's knee bag. As you'd want, there are ISOFIX child seat fastenings in all three seating rows and the usual electronic assistance for traction and stability control, primarily DSC Plus stability control and DTC traction control. There's a trailer stabilisation function too that'll stop trailer sway if you've a tow bar fitted, and hill start assistant to stop you from drifting backwards on uphill junctions. There's plenty of braking peace of mind too, with the ABS system supplemented by fading compensation, CBC or cornering brake control, and a neat brake drying system that keeps the brake discs free of moisture in wet weather. Panic stops are aided by a brake assist system and advertised to following motorists by dynamic brake lights that flash a bright warning. You also get a multi-collision braking function that, in the event of an impact, will keep brake pressure applied until you come to a complete standstill. Tyre pressure monitoring is standard as well, as is a speed limit info display that pictures speed signs you pass and displays them on the dash. Another neat safety feature fitted as standard across the range is the attentiveness assistant that monitors you for signs of drowsiness. This X7 is one of the first BMW models to operate this setup with an in-cabin camera rather than steering wheel sensors. The camera constantly scans your eyes for signs of undue exhaustion. That intelligent personal assistant voice system can help here too. If you were to say, "Hey BMW, I'm tired," It would trigger a program that would adjust the lighting mood, cabin temperature and music to try and make you feel more awake and alert. Plus, like all BMWs, this one has the brand's BMW emergency call with teleservices system, which in an accident can automatically alert the emergency services. This system not only gives them your exact GPS location, but also provides recovery personnel with information on your speed at point of impact, how hard the seatbelts were pulled, how many airbags burst, and so on. If you were to have a crash, it would all mean not only that the emergency teams would know exactly where you were, but also that they would arrive on the scene more prepared and ready to get you to safety than they could ever otherwise be, a potentially life-saving difference. In recent times, this setup's been further improved to also automatically activate after low-speed collisions below the threshold for airbag deployment, immediately after the impact, flashing up an iDrive screen message offering to contact BMW's Accident Assistance Service directly. If you want more in terms of driver assistance and safety tech, you're going to have to stump up for the extra cost. Driving Assistant Professional Pack that also includes the choiciest parts of BMW's autonomous driving technology. There's a lot here and some of the features interact with each other, but we'll try and talk you through what this professional pack includes as clearly as we can. The autonomous driving part of the Driving Assistant Professional Pack lies primarily with two elements. There's active cruise control with distance control, there to regulate your distance to the vehicle in front and able, if necessary, to even slow you right down to a stop and start you off again. It incorporates a radar-based approach control function that senses other traffic around you and can adapt throttle and brakes accordingly. But the real highlight of the Driving Assistant Professional Pack is BMW's Steering and Lane Control Assistant, which takes its bearings from road markings and vehicles driving ahead through using data from a trifocal camera and a front-range radar, enabling it to work with the driver to help centre the car in the directed lane with corrective steering input. The setup can make corrective steering interventions at speeds of up to 130 miles an hour, though you still have to keep your hands on the wheel at all times. We found that it works particularly well in heavy traffic, and we especially like the brand's active navigation tech. This system uses navigation data to spot in advance when a lane change will be required. In preparation, the system will automatically adjust the car's speed to make it easier to steer into a suitable gap in the adjacent lane, which, if you wish, the car can do automatically using its lane change assistant feature. We mentioned that this Driving Assistance Professional Pack also includes a whole suite of BMW's latest camera safety tech, so let's brief you on that here. There's active lane guidance, which adds subtle steering lock to ease you back to where you ought to be if the lane departure warning system we mentioned earlier detects that you've inadvertently veered over carriage lane delineating lines. In addition, as part of this pack, you also get BMW's Lane Keeping Assistant with active side collision protection package, which incorporates side collision warning and lane change warning, all of which stops you from pulling out when there's a vehicle in your blind spot and adds in light steering intervention that will ease you back to where you ought to be on the road, should you drift offline. We also like the pack's cross-traffic warning front feature, which alerts you to oncoming vehicles if you're trying to edge out of a junction and can't completely see traffic coming at you from either side. Additionally, there's automatic speed limit assist, which works with the traffic sign recognition system to recognise speed limits and prevent you from exceeding them. We haven't finished yet either. The Driving Assistant Professional Pack also includes an emergency stop feature, which can bring the car to a controlled stop if you're taken ill, exit warning, which alerts occupants to oncoming traffic if they're about to dangerously open their doors, and an evasion aid, that gives you extra steering assistance in critical situations where it's still possible to avoid a collision. Say, for example, someone suddenly pulls out in front of you, or you suddenly have to make a dramatic lane change to avoid slow-moving traffic. Plus, there's crossroads warning, incorporating give way warning and side collision warning, which alerts you to traffic coming at you from the sides at a crossroads. And finally, as the name suggests, wrong way warning. Makes a huge fuss if you forget yourself and end up going the wrong way down a one-way street. It's all very reassuring. You won't be expecting an X7 to be particularly cheap to run. It isn't. But BMW wants to assure you that everything possible has been done to keep running costs in check. Well, not quite everything possible. There's no plug-in hybrid powertrain of the kind you can get in the smaller X5. Presumably, the inclusion of a third seating row here doesn't leave space for that PHEV setup's battery to fit beneath the boot floor. So instead, X7 customers are given the brand's 48-volt mild hybrid system on all three of the engines on offer. We're usually sceptical about the real-world benefit of most mild hybrid systems, but this one promises a bit more than most, being able to facilitate purely electric driving at very low speeds. To be honest, we haven't noticed this happening very often during our tests, but the Munich maker must think this will be a regular occurrence because it's fitted the car with an acoustic pedestrian warning system that cuts in at such low speeds to alert unwary pavement folk to this behemoth BMW's approach. Otherwise, the mild hybrid setup works as such systems these days usually do. Fitting a powerful 48-volt starter generator and a tiny second battery enables a significant increase in the amount of brake energy that can be regenerated and stored. This energy is used not just to supply the electrical system, but also to lighten the combustion engine's workload and boost its power. The starter generator also increases efficiency by assisting the engine when driving at constant speeds. You'll be wondering about the difference all this makes to running cost efficiency, and we still are, because the industry's measuring cycle has changed since the launch of the original version of this car, making it difficult to compare new figures with old. What we can tell you is that the MHEV system hasn't made much difference to fuel economy and CO2 emissions. Still, given that all three of the engines on offer are now more powerful than before, there's obviously some frugality benefit being accrued. Unfortunately though, it's slim, which means that running an X7 will still require a deep pocket. Here we're trying the 6-cylinder petrol model, the xDrive 40i, which manages up to 30.7 mpg on the combined cycle and up to 210 grams per kilometre of CO2. You'd hope for a big step up in frugality by opting instead for the xDrive 40D diesel variant, but you don't really get it. The figures there are up to 37.2 mpg and up to 200 grams per kilometre. To be fair, that looks good against the figures of a rival Mercedes GLS 400D, 32.1 mpg and 229 grams per kilometre. For completion, we'll give you the thirstier stats for the top X7, the V8 petrol M60i xDrive, up to 23.2 mpg and up to 278 grams per kilometre. Apart from the mild hybrid tech, BMW's efforts towards efficiency here have been centred on the two usual areas, aerodynamics and weight. There's not much you can do to make a bluff, boxy 7-seat SUV like this sleeker, but you can manage its airflow better, hence the active air flap control system, which adjusts incoming airflow to the engine's speed. Both the lower air flaps and those positioned in the front kidney grille can be opened and closed through several stages, reducing aerodynamic drag by up to 7%. Air curtains in the outer sections of the front apron steer the air efficiently around the wheels, and air directing elements positioned on either side of the rear window team up with the roof spoiler to create a precisely defined airflow cutoff. As for weight, well, most of the exterior panels you can see, bonnet, side panels and doors, are made not from steel but from lighter weight aluminium. That doesn't stop the car still tipping the scales at a hefty 2.5 tonnes though. The figures we gave you earlier assume, of course, that the car is being run in its most frugal Eco Pro mode. In this setting, the air conditioning and power steering only work when required to save energy, and what's called a proactive driving assistant is activated. This links in with this BMW's professional navigation system, enabling the car to detect braking situations in advance, such as when entering built-up areas, speed limit zones, corners and filter lanes, and prepare the drive system accordingly. As usual with the BMW, routine maintenance is dictated by condition-based servicing that monitors oil level and engine wear, taking into account how long it's been and how far the car has travelled since its previous garage visit. The centre screen has a vehicle status menu via which you can keep an eye on service requirements, use a check control system for key vehicle functions, and also monitor engine oil level and tyre pressures. A teleservices feature comes as part of the BMW Connected Drive services you can also access through the iDrive infotainment system. Via this, before each service appointment due, your X7 can automatically put in a teleservices call to your nominated BMW service centre, complete with detailed information on vehicle condition. You'll then get a call to arrange a service appointment, something you'll already have budgeted for if, at the point of original purchase, you opted for one of the two fixed cost service inclusive or service inclusive plus packages, which cover you for 5 years or 50,000 miles. With these, after a one-off payment, you'll have the peace of mind of knowing that all normal work on the car has been paid for during this period, including items such as oil, spark plugs and filters. What else might you need to know? Well, you're obviously looking at a full luxury car level of vehicle excise duty. For the two 6-cylinder models, that'll be £1,510 in year one of ownership, then an extra £450 a year for the next 4 years of ownership. We'll also tell you that BMW's warranty only lasts for 3 years, but does include an emergency breakdown service, and at least it isn't mileage limited. There's a 3-year paintwork warranty and the usual 12-year anti-corrosion warranty. As for insurance groupings, well, all X7s are rated at a top-of-the-shop Group 50. The other big ownership cost with a luxury contender of this kind lies with depreciation, something that can often be easily forgotten about in the excitement of ordering a new car. Independent experts reckon that a typical X7 xDrive 40D M Sport variant will be worth around 50% of its original value after 3 years and 60,000 miles. Really exotic super luxury SUVs like the Lamborghini Urus, the Rolls-Royce Cullinan and the Mercedes Maybach GLS are all very well, but they only actually seat 5 people. If you want to seat 7 with ultimate SUV luxury and you want something a bit nicer than, say, an Audi Q7, a Volvo XC90 or a lengthened Land Rover Defender, your only options are a long wheelbase Range Rover or a Bentley Bentayga, or, if you can't quite stretch to those two, a Mercedes GLS or this BMW X7. Thanks to these updates, this Bavarian contender now looks more appealing in this exalted company. If you can afford the plump asking prices and you don't happen to be one of those people who'll dislike this car on sight merely because of its monstrous bulk and showy front grille, there's certainly lots to draw you here. In its earlier form, this X7 seemed to us a bit too much like a supersized X5. But the changes BMW's made to this refreshed model, inside and out, now make it feel the more versatile alternative to a 7 Series saloon that the Munich maker always wanted its flagship SUV model to be. The updated interior certainly now meets that brief, with enhanced screen and media tech offering a decent step forward. Just as importantly, it's no longer necessary to option up the cabin with features like the sky view panoramic roof, the crafted Clarity cabin decor and the Bowers & Wilkins diamond audio system to make this car's interior feel really high-end. Though if you can afford features like these, they still add the icing onto a very expensive cake. Are there issues? Well, we're disappointed that the mild hybrid tech introduced to the two 6-cylinder engines hasn't yielded more of an efficiency benefit, and the BMW still doesn't offer its plug-in hybrid tech. On the plus side, this car handles more sharply than any of its rivals, though you've to spend expensively on stabilisation and all-wheel steering tech to get the full effect. But spending expensively is something typical customers will be used to doing. If you're one of these people, this X7 will have a distinctive appeal if you like the brand's cool sporting vibe, have a large family and want the very best. Size matters, but then you always knew that, didn't you?